So, welcome to the Simply WoW podcast, episode 0. Uh, I'm Meeps. With me is Rise
Hi there, how's it going?
and Jay.
Sup.
We are a couple of nerds that run a guild called Psy. And yes, it goes about as well as you would think with a name like that. Uh,
Not only is it our guild name, but it's also one of the most common things we say.
yep,
Mm-hmm.
just C
See the
guild
guild
name.
Yep.
So, Rise, you want to start us off with a bit of your background with WoW?
Sure. It's actually funny because out of Psy, I'm currently the GM of Psy, but I also feel like I have the least amount of experience in comparison to at least the two of you. But I usually try to play games at a much higher level than the normal person. I kind of got started through one of my buddies at the end of Warlords of Draenor. He got me through heroic carries and was doing a bunch of Mythic Dungeons with me, and I thought, oh, this game is interesting. It's kind of fun. We went into Legion expansion, and I was playing Fire Mage, had some enjoyment with that, and then I couldn't get really into the raiding scene right away. Afterwards, I got on with the guild that I raided with for quite a while, Perdition. Ended up becoming an officer, and then was raid lead for Perdition through when we pushed through Mythic, and we got to Grand Mage Elisond, and that's where we stopped our Mythic progression before I joined you guys in, I believe, the second iteration of Psy in Tuba Circuitous. Yeah, second iteration.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was the second one. Yeah, and then I met you two guys. Well, I'd met Meeps before, but it doesn't matter. And then yeah, we did that for a long time. Stopped playing with you guys after we somewhat disbanded at the end of Uldir. Played with Resistance, and then here we are back again, trying to reset everything. And I'm currently playing Shaman. So yeah, it's not too much about me, but I'm definitely the most baby as far as overall game experience out of the cast of us.
Yeah, I figured we'd get yours out of the way for that reason, because
Oh yeah, mine's short and sweet.
Jay and I go way back with this game.
Oh yeah, but it's a good thing too, especially since running a guild with people that are very experienced and have played multiple tiers, multiple expansions, and then also played a variety of different classes. Like
Right.
you guys are incredibly knowledgeable about the game as a whole, so you guys have much higher leg up on me in that regard.
At the same time, you've been really specialized on Shaman this whole time, so anything that I learned from Shaman, I'd definitely go to you first to try to learn how to play it.
So it's understandable. I guess I appreciate the compliment in that regard.
All right, Jay, you want to take it over?
Oh, story time.
Yeah, buckle up.
How long is he gonna ramble?
Let's see. Started playing WoW, friends and family beta. Classic. Not classic, vanilla. Distinguishing between the two.
Yeah.
So I've been playing since before the game was live. Probably about 8 months before the game was live. Put it this way, I've been playing so long that my first character that I hit max level on was a hunter when max level was 20, and hunters, specifically Taurens, had an ability called plane striding that let them basically run at mounted speed.
Wow.
Yep.
Yeah. Like, that's how long I've been playing.
And the 2-hour stomp cooldown that the Taurens had?
Yep.
It was 2 hours?
Yep.
It was ridiculously long.
All right.
But yeah, favorite part of the game was plane striding because my Tauren could literally just run through the meadows of Mulgore, and everything was good. Everything was totally good. Yeah, I've been for the most part rating at the higher edge of progression, on the cutting edge, from basically, yeah, probably UBRS back when it was a raid, all the way through to probably right before Deathwing came out is when I just stopped raiding hardcore. So my teenage years, high school years, were get home from school, raid till 2 a.m, go to bed, repeat 5 days a week. So that was fun. Got to World 50th for a couple of kills, couple of different bosses. Server second, Algalon, 25 man, which was dope. A couple other achievements I'm very proud of. Herald of the Titans in current content. tribute to dedicated insanity I would have had, except our holy pally DC'd and
Ugh.
gave us 1 wipe.
Oh,
And we never went back because tribute to dedicated insanity is dedicated insanity. And we were like, fuck it. No, we give up.
get it once and we're done.
So Chipper, if you ever watch this, thanks, bud. Um,
Decade
he's,
later.
he's also the holy pally that I replaced as a resto shaman for our Lich King heroic kill. So I felt really proud on that because everyone's like, resto shamans can't main heal, and I'm like, watch me.
Bitch, please.
What? You just stack MP5 and chain heal. Ooh, I'm done.
Yep.
Yeah, just get spam chain heal, guys.
Haste plus MP5, win at life, basically. So
I remember that.
yeah, that was all of that. That was a lot of fun. Pretty much after that, Kata, I took a break. When Deathwing came out, I came back very briefly during Throne of Thunder. Didn't even touch the raid.
Oh.
PvP'd pretty hard for about a month, and then quit until Draenor, basically. So, and then after that, basically, I wanted to recapture that, like, raiding at the cutting edge, but I also didn't want to abandon all my friends. So I wanted to find a medium for that, and that ultimately brought me to Meeps, who I met just randomly in Emerald Nightmare, I think.
I thought.
We were pugging to try and fill Mythic Raid,
Yeah,
and we were
yeah.
like, hey. And then we added each other to friends, and like a week later, we made a guild, and it was called Psy. And the rest is history.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
It was that quick of turnaround.
So okay, and then past that, just you guys did something with Crown. Was that? I thought that was like Trial of Valor. Or was that Nighthold?
Are we
Both.
going to talk about that?
I mean, it's part of your history. So,
That's true.
I'm okay giving full disclosure. I mean, look, so part of the things that really, full disclosure, part of the thing that really got me like excited to do this podcast is when we were talking about like what niche it would fill. And I told you guys a little story while we were in the fish boss with the eels after Nighthold, before Tomb.
Turn
Can't
about.
remember. Thank
Wait,
you.
no. Wait, was that in
Legion.
Legion?
After Nighthold.
Tomb of Sargeras.
There was-
Eel boss.
Tomb
Eel
came.
boss.
Tomb came right after.
Yeah, it was Nighthold and then Tomb of Sargeras, and then it was
because there's like a fish boss that had like eels that were AoE, and then you had that shark that would come in.
she was the Naga chick. She was
That was Tomb.
What was her name? Yeah, that was in Tomb. That was like the fourth boss in Tomb, right
Was it
after
Tomb?
the big Naga guy. Oh, that's gonna bug me.
That's the same raid instance as the two sisters with the like night cycle that you could kill the raid if you just bounce back and forth. Really fun. Anyway, during that tier, Psy was not doing particularly well. We had like stable 16 or 17 people. But you need 20 to Mythic raid, and Mythic wasn't ready to do cross realm because there wasn't enough people that got cutting edge or whatever. So,
Yep.
or no, there was, and I was literally adding people from the BNet forums and just being, hey, want to raid? Hey, want to raid? Hey, want to raid? Like everybody that was looking for a guild. And I was bringing in like 3-4 trials a week. And unfortunately, people would show up to raid and they'd be like, oh, great, we're one short again tonight. So then they would leave. And then the next week I'd bring in 3 more trials. And it was that perpetuating cycle where we had like 18 people for raid. And I remember looking, like, figuring in a moment of like, I'm an absolute failure. I was GM at the time. Being like, I don't know what the fuck I'm doing. So I started Googling like how to raid lead properly. Why do people keep leaving the guild? All that stuff. And I noticed there is a massive lack of any information from a guild management perspective. And I was like, hey, maybe this could be a thing. So with that in mind, I have no problem giving up all the dirty secrets of what happened with Crown.
Okay. By the way, the boss you were thinking of, Mistress of Shavage. However you end up pronouncing that, but her name was Mistress.
Yeah, I think everybody called her Mistress, right? Yeah. That makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
That totally makes sense.
I had to log in a while because that shit was gonna fucking bug me.
I was just gonna wow at it.
I am proud to say, I think right now is the like greatest point that Psy's ever been since inception. We've had our highs and lows. Yeah. I think we're at the highest high right now.
Yeah,
I agree.
in comparison to how we were in Antorus, as far as progression wise, we have now surpassed when we were, I believe it was Jay, you were GM of the previous iteration. And when we were doing Antorus, that was like the furthest we had gotten. And now that we've actually killed Mythic Il'gynoth, we're actually now have surpassed that. And with how stable our roster is, I think it's fair to say that this is currently the best iteration. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's kind of
Oh,
weird to think
I
about.
would agree. Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I think let's put it this way. I don't think anybody in the raid expected to get Il'gynoth down on Wednesday.
14,
Right.
14 pulls. One of them was everyone run out of the room because we had someone pull the boss accidentally. Holy
Yeah,
crap,
like-
that was good.
He's in the call.
Also, another weird thing, just to like kind of just randomly go on a tangent. The thing that's funny about Il'gynoth is that we only had 14 pulls in like 2 hours. It's like every single pull was like 5-6 minutes. That boss is like for 100 pulls. That's like a 2-week rating for most guilds,
Right.
which is pretty weird to think about. That we did it in half a night.
Right.
Well, and to be fair, we got to the boss and we had about 10-15 minutes before we'd normally take break, and somebody said that they had to go right then and if we could take break early, so we did. So really that 2 hours is more like an hour and 40 minutes.
Yeah.
Like it I'm really impressed that we actually did it. I don't think anybody expected it.
So looping back, the guild's in a great spot now. Obviously, the first iteration of Signs, kind of disbanded and stopped. So what happened with Crown? Because I can't remember if you said Crown was you did the Crown thing. Was that Trial of Valor and then through Nighthold, or was that a different time?
It was the end of Trial of Valor, or no, it was just as Trial of Valor first came out,
Right.
or maybe a month into Trial of Valor, all the way up till about halfway through Nighthold. But before we get that, we should let Meeps get up to this point in the timeline so that all of our timelines are chronological.
All right.
Well, yeah, because the two of you now have linked up if we go with Meeps' timeline. So yeah, let's hear it.
Yeah.
All right. So my beginning starts all the way back in my last year of high school, because I'm an old fuck. I didn't start the beta like Jay did, though. I started in vanilla WoW maybe a month or two after the game came out. And I only started, I don't know if I'd have ever played WoW if it weren't for Warcraft 3. I loved that game. I like the whole story. I wanted to see Arthas. I wanted to, because he wasn't dead. I knew that going into the game. That was the big thing that got me to play WoW in the beginning. Was I want to go see Arthas. I want to say hi. I don't want to kill him. I just want to say hi. But several hours and living in the sticks of Kansas with no real internet. I think I was still on dial-up. So yeah. So it was kind of rough. And I got to level 29 on a dwarf hunter was my highest level character. I got 29 dwarf hunter and discovered.
I was also Alliance.
No, you were Torn. You just said.
No, that was in the beta. But when live came out, I actually went Alliance because I was playing a human rogue named Rock.
I was Pookie.
ROKC because I was super unoriginal with my name.
I don't know why I go with the cutesy names, but Pookie was my dwarf, and then I got the private title, so I was Private Pookie. Oh, I loved it. But I would meet up after school. Go on.
Of course you were Private Pookie. Of course you were.
That had to have been planned.
It was by luck. I was so happy whenever I got the private title. But I would get home from school. It was the last couple months of school, and as soon as I get home, I'd log on after about 10 minutes of dialing up, and then I camped Warsong Gulch. I never left. At the time, you had to be at the entrance to queue up for the battleground, and so every day around the same time I got on, 2 other hunters got on, Night Elf hunters. I still remember their names. They were level 29, Tigerhawk and Lyceres. And we would just go in and raffle stomp Warsong Gulch. 329 hunters, we just shit all over them. Like, we graveyard camped every game, which is the only reason that I farmed enough to get private. But eventually, it kind of wore out for me. The internet, the lag was just ridiculous. So I gave that account to my cousin, and I think he still got the account. I know we used to play together. He's the reason I got back into it when I did, and that was toward the end, maybe the last month of Burning Crusade was whenever I got back on, and I level capped a priest, and it was a Draenei priest for whatever reason. I was still playing Alliance, and I love the theming. I love theming so much that I capped this priest by going all healing talents. No smite bonus damage, no holy fire bonus damage. So I really ground out those levels all the way up to 70 totally healing.
You masochist.
Yeah. Yeah, I got lucky.
That's still insane to me.
At like level 63 or something, I found a warrior in Zanger Marsh and just followed him around and healed him as he cleared everything. But then Wrath, right before Wrath came out, I wanted to switch it up and I went DK actually. Yeah, it was a DK and then my Hunter. I kind of leveled them both together and played them both at the same time. But that's when I created Meeps, my Hunter. And whenever I started
Meeps
really,
was born.
yeah, I started really learning the game by the time ICC came out, I think is whenever I really got into raiding. I was playing a shaman in a 25-man guild and my hunter in a 10-man guild, which I was one of the officers of and helped to found, but I don't really remember much other than that. And I got all the achievements for 25 and 10-man and really got a taste for that high-end raiding. But I didn't start really high-end raiding until Miss Pandaria. Miss Pandaria that's like the highest I've ever been. Like that's the most engaged in the game I've ever been. So whenever challenge modes came out, I really, really got into challenge modes. I put up world fastest times in every dungeon. I think at one point or another. I know I had realm fastest times in every dungeon.
I was gonna say, every time that it's brought up, you link like 15 different challenge mode dungeon achievements, and you're like, oh, this is world first, this is server first, this is world best, this is server best. You know, it's obvious that it's there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was my WoW skill peak because I cared more about the game than I have since. Like to a degree that I don't even want to have that much care in the game again. It's too much. Because then at the same time I was raiding. This is whenever I joined Simple Math for the last raid of the tier of the expansion, and that was Siege of Orgrimmar, and we finished US 52nd.
Wow.
And I don't remember who I was raiding with. But every raid up until that point, I finished late. Like it wasn't anything like a cutting edge, but I always finished at every boss. I got all the achievements because I'm an achievement whore. Except for PvP. I got a bad taste in my mouth in PvP because I started in Wrath on a hunter, and when hunters had minimum fucking range, so hunters didn't PvP. Not really, not in arena, because anyone could just sit on them and the hunter couldn't do anything.
Yeah.
So then Miss Pandaria going into Warlords, I was still with Simple Math, and we started slipping. One of the reasons Simple Math was so high up is they rated 12 hours, 16 hours a week, 4 days, 4 hours. And I think that ended in the first tier of Warlords. We went down to 12 hours a week. And we ended what was after Heimel before Hellfire? Blackrock Foundry.
Blackrock Foundry.
Yeah. BRF, yeah.
We ended Blackrock Foundry, still rating 12 hours a week at US 102. And I had the bit in my teeth at that point. I wanted to raid hardcore. So that's whenever I went over to Pathogen, who was US 13th in HFC and only rating 9 hours a week. So I was like, wow, well, this is where I want to be. And sure enough, they accepted me. And yeah, we ended up getting Manoroth US 13th, and then had to get a couple people in because, like Sai, we had roster issues. So we ended up finishing the tier at US 32nd. But that was
Still
whenever,
very good.
yeah.
Yeah, still
And
really fucking good.
because of the environment, that's whenever I was probably the best rating hunter I'll ever be. Because like it is a very toxic, very competitive environment. And so that's whenever I hit my parses were the highest. I was ranked 8th in the world as a marksman hunter. And that'll never
Damn.
happen again. It's not something I even really wanted. I like if you didn't have the numbers, you sat. So I had to. That was whenever I was cutthroat and padding left and right and center. But Pathogen, I stayed with them until the beginning of Legion. We did Emerald Nightmare, and this is what drove me out of Pathogen. I played Demon Hunter. I was gonna tank, so the whole legendary system, I didn't get
Oh,
right.
you didn't get the good one, and someone took your spot, huh?
Yep. Except
Ah,
it was a
fuck.
double. It was a double whammy because not only did I not get the good legendaries, but Demon Hunter wasn't very good for Mythic Emerald Nightmare tanking. So the warrior that got one right legendary just was like, well, we got to have this warrior. Like he's just so much tankier. So I tried to switch to DPS, but at that point, I'd used up all my legendary slots on tank stuff because you got four. Like it had the hidden mechanic of you get four legendaries
Yeah.
and then it takes forever. So I just could never earn my spot back in, and like I said, it was a really toxic environment. And as you guys know, I am not exactly the nicest person. So for me to say that it was in a toxic environment, you can take that to the bank.
Well, for what it's worth, I think that statement is a little bit misunderstood.
Go on.
You can be a dick. Like, okay, let's put it this way: I can be a dick. Rise can be a dick. You can definitely be a dick. If you want to go there, you can go there. I think most times what it boils down to is you're not going to sugarcoat something. If it needs to be said, you're just going to say it in as little words as possible to get it out there. Rip that band-aid off quick kind of mentality. And sorry if you don't like it. That sometimes comes across as this guy's being an asshole just because he can. And, so I think it's a little bit misunderstood. But
It used to
you're
be a
right.
lot worse too. Like now
Yeah.
I've mellowed out in my old age. But
Old age.
Fuck.
Ain't that
but
old.
but it was losing my spot, losing interest in raiding with that group. I've still had the taste for high end raiding. That's never left. But now I would prefer raiding with friends. And with that philosophy in mind, at the end of Emerald Nightmare, I looked through my friends list and I hit up a couple of pugs and decided, hey, let's build our own guild. I've got a load of friends that used to raid that are like have had their time in the spotlight, like a lot of top 50 US friends. And then Jay and
You notice how he sighed when he said that?
Yep.
The birth of the name.
So I convinced groups of friends here and there, and the first iteration of Psy was born at the tail end of Emerald Nightmare. Whenever we 18 manned Mythic Emerald Nightmare, because
With 18, how far did you get?
we
5
ate
to 7.
the whole thing. No, we did the whole
Wow.
thing.
We got with 18, we got 5 to 7. We had to get 2 more for the
Okay,
last 2.
yeah,
Though.
yeah.
Yeah.
Scenario
'Cause,
sounded like it would be hard. 18.
Panda got 2 of his friends to come in for
Okay.
what's his name?
Scenarios?
Is it
Scenarios.
Scenarius and
Xavius.
Scenarios came first, but he was the harder one.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, that's
Yeah,
because
no sense.
So dumb.
that's because Shadow Priest could shred Xavius. So that boss lasted all of half a minute. Did we lose Jay? Bye, Jay.
Bye, Jay. Okay,
But
so that's where you guys were in Emerald Nightmare.
that
So
was
now
the
you two are linked up in the timeline.
yeah. Those two, or yeah, us two. That's when that was when Psy formed. Uh,
Mhm.
and I was GM at that time. Luckily, I've never been GM again because it doesn't really suit me.
Okay.
You know what?
Which I think
Just
is
don't
something.
bother transferring.
it's, I think it's something. I think it's something that's funny is to bring up is all three of us have been GM of Psy, and all three of us have raid led Psy.
Yeah, that's actually true.
Yep. Yep.
As quick side tangent, not inside, but did either of you guys have any other like officer or raid leading positions in a different guild, like Crown or Clubhouse or anything like that?
You want to go first, Meeps?
Sure. Before Psy, there were a couple of guilds that I either raid. I never GM'd a guild, but I raid led a couple of times.
Oh, okay.
Not in simple
Yeah.
math or pathogen, but or I would
Mm.
like the raid leader would sit out in simple math a couple times, and then I would raid lead, but not as the main raid leader.
Gotcha. Okay.
Um, back in the day in Classic, not Classic, sorry. I don't know why I keep doing that. Probably because
Vanilla.
Classic is new, but in Vanilla, 40-man raids were a thing. So for all of you new gen WoW players that don't know what that is, 40 fucking people. So you usually had a pretty good split of each class, and one person really can't wrangle that many people. So we had a technique in the guild I was in called End Result. So you had each class, you would have like 6 players from that class, and one person would be that class officer. And then they would all talk with the raid leader, figure out what you're going to do. And that one person would be in charge for making sure, for example, all the rogues are set, all the warriors are set. So while Swifty was in charge of all the warriors, name drop, I was in charge of all the rogues. Kestrel, awesome person, was in charge of all the druids. She probably still doesn't play. Bewitch was in charge of all the paladins, all that stuff. So everything you kind of like delineated like that. So while I didn't raid lead in vanilla, um, pretty much from Rag all the way up to Oro, Cthulhu, all the way into actually PTR testing um, of Naxxramas in vanilla. I was helping raid lead, but not doing callouts and stuff. But basically, the raid leader would say like, "Okay, rogues need to do this," and I would just organize all of them. So very, very early on in WoW, the training wheels for leadership had started. So from that point onwards, I had led a couple of different guilds: Burning Crusade, Wrath, pretty much up until I quit. Didn't really, when I was in my peak of like top 50, rating, didn't really lead any of that. Wasn't an officer, but it sounds weird to say this, but I was a respected member of the raid. A lot of people would like to think that their raids all respect each other equally. Um, I think we all know that certain people, like as leadership, I think we can all agree that certain people, when they voice up an opinion, you listen to them more than other people.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can agree with that.
I was one of the people that while I wasn't in charge of decision making, if I had something to say, I would say it, and literally everybody would listen. So it was nice in that aspect to not be in charge but still be able to be heard. And then basically, right up to when I met Meeps, playing in Warlords of Draenor, led my guild through all of that up until Hellfire Citadel is when I left my guild because it broke up. So like some of the guys that you guys know, like Kyle and Brian and all of them, we all used to raid together. And then that guild broke up, and went on to do my own thing, chasing server first at that point with can't remember who it was, but I was on Kill Jaden at the time. And then obviously meeting up to bring us back to the timeline, I was actually running a guild. Our intention when Legion released was to go hard. So I got all the guys from the previous iteration of what would eventually become Psy. It was called Kingsbane at the time. I thought it was a cool name. It kind of is, but mostly sucks.
It's no Psy.
Yeah, it's not Psy. It would eventually become Psy because it shares like 10 members across the
Right.
whole thing. But um, we wanted to push fucking hard, so we had like 10 people. And about 3 months before Legion, we put up a post on the WoW forums. Our strict requirements were you had to maintain two um, dedicated characters, not just specs, two dedicated characters to your main role and one off role. So,
Hmm.
for example, based on your current roles, Rise, you'd be an Ellie shaman plus another ranged, class. Plus, you could either be a melee DPS, a tank, or a healer on your third character.
Okay, so it'd be Ellie, Resto, and Fire Mage.
No, it'd be Ellie shaman plus
Oh,
Fire
three
Mage
characters.
plus another role different character.
Woof.
Now we made that
Oh.
rule 3 months before Legion came out. I think we all know what happened with Legion,
Oh,
especially
yeah.
the legendary rule. My first character, I was maining an Ellie shaman. I got the neck that gives you a shield.
Ye old
So
pride
that
ass.
character immediately got benched, and I became a hunter that got the root pants.
Which was
So
actually a
my
solid
new main-
legendary.
Yeah.
I mean,
So my new main after that was something entirely different. I can't even remember.
Yeah, it's funny that you bring that up because when I was playing, and the guild that I was playing with my buddy, it was called Aftershock. They were a no-name guild. They were like heroic at their peak, and that's not what I wanted later. But when I initially stepped into Emerald Nightmare with them, the day before that Tuesday reset, and we were going to raid, I got my first legendary, and I was like, "Oh my god, I'm so excited!" And I was playing Fire Mage, and I looked at it, and it's these boots that literally made it so I have a chance to cast while moving, and I'm like, I can already do that 90% of the time. Fuck me. It's just worthless trash.
I can have Scorch.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so I know that feel. As a side note. God,
Yeah.
that was so bad.
So I was actually leading that guild, which the name was Icon. I thought it was pretty cool. I've always liked one-word guild names.
that
Like
was
the one
Jay's input
that
to the
shall
name
not be
Psy.
named. Right. Like the guild that shall not be named, that is no longer a guild. Limit, Blood Legion, I didn't really like. Like it's two, like you can't do that. Just go with one. And I was like, Icon. It tells you who we are. We were not that good. Icon oversold the name. If we would have settled with Psy, everybody would have known what was up right then and there. But instead, we went with Icon. Partially stole it from a band I was listening to at the time called Icon for Hire, which is a pretty good band. But anyway, and actually, that's where I had met Meeps because we needed people, and I was like, let's get this random guy that showed up in the queue finder or whatever, and he beat every single one of the DPS, but like one, I think, and soundly.
That's, as a funny side note, that is the weirdest feeling. It's like, oh, I'm going to join this guild run. Oh shit, I'm better than every single one of them.
Yeah, and then what prompts you to go, you know what? I'm going to add the GM to my friends list.
These guys are great.
These are good people.
Probably a feeling of superiority that's like, you know what? Whenever I want an ego boost, I'm going to come back.
You guys down for next week?
Whenever I'm feeling bummed. Yeah, exactly. But yeah, that's where I met Meeps, and like no kidding, 2 weeks after I met Meeps, he put a message in his BattleNet tag that actually said, "Does anybody want to start a guild? Hit me up." And I messaged him, and I'm like, "Well, I mean, I'm already running my own guild. What kind of thing you thinking?" And he had mentioned, basically what he just previously laid out, which was, getting a bunch of friends from a bunch of different places and having them all collapse onto one server under one roof and just going hard. So he did that, and I contributed, what was left of the shambles of Icon. At this point was probably once we announced like, all right, guys, this isn't working. I took like the probably 10 people that were left that were interested and went with Meeps and everybody that he had gathered to make something work, and Psy was born.
Yeah,
There you go.
we had Trek. He raided with me in Pathogen. He was the off tank to the guild master Mateo. I think he's the only one from Pathogen that came along. No, Naz came later. He used to heal for Pathogen as well.
Yep.
And then Panda's group of friends, I I met him basically the same way. No, wait. So I met Panda wasted one night, demanding to do Mythic Plus. I was hammered, and I wanted to do Mythic Plus, so I just got into a random group and just I was on a Demon Hunter, I think, and I just destroyed, just wiped the floor with everyone. And Panda added me to his friends list because Panda only adds really good players to his friends list.
Yeah.
So
That's weird. He still has me added.
Shadow Priest? What?
Right? I wasn't always shit, okay? I was okay as a rogue.
Anyway, so you added
But-
Panda in his group.
and I don't know because Panda's always kind of been floats to whatever's doing really well. But
Yeah.
at the time,
He's not only is he a good player, but he's also really flavor of the month.
yeah,
But I mean, that's fine, especially
Yeah.
when you can flaunt it.
I think
Yeah.
the thing that he would agree with is he's always 1 foot in.
yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
But I mean, he gets his cutting edges. I ain't hating on him for it.
Yep.
But at the time, I hadn't known him very long, and I knew he was a really good player. So he became one of the first officers. Jay became one of the first officers. I think Sci-Fry was another one of the first officers.
Yeah. Yep. Very briefly until we merged into Crown, and then he stepped down because
Yeah.
we didn't want to have like 20 officers.
Yeah.
So it was you, me, Trek, Panda, and Sci-Fi.
Oh yeah, I made Trex an officer because that's the only way I could get him to come tank for us.
Yeah. And also, it makes things easier if he knows what's going on.
Right. But yeah,
Okay.
that was by and large the very first iteration of Psy.
Yeah.
We had really
Then
strong healers between Chocolate and Sci-Fry.
Yeah.
Sci-Fi
Chocolate was one of the guys that had, answered the icon call based on the BattleNet forums, and he messaged me. He added me a BTAG one day, and he's like, "Hey man, I kind of like Holy Pally, and I kind of like Resto Shaman, and like Mistweaver, and Disc, and Holy," and I'm like, yeah, "That's all of them." He's like, "Yeah, basically, I want to heal," and I'm like, "Okay." He's like, "Is it cool for my third character if I just do another healer?" I'm like, "If you're a good healer, yeah." But the option,
I suppose we'll bend the rules.
yeah. So then he comes in, and literally from night 1, it's nothing less than 90% healing parses. Like,
Wow.
literally the first night in Emerald Nightmare, all the way up until, he unfortunately got his computer to die and never came back.
Feels bad, man.
Yeah. It's pretty good.
Well, Jay, since you actually stuck it out in Crown longer than I did and are more aware of everything that happened, do you want to take the whole Crown debacle?
Yeah, I've heard this story once before, but I want to hear it for the record, putting it out there
All right.
for the whole world to know.
In all its terrible, gory details, we had realized in Psy that we were at the position where we had, and this is a familiar position you guys will know well, like 16, 17 players. We knew they were all good. We had a couple that we were like, all right, well, this person, we can clear half a mythic with this person, but then eventually we'd like to, get somebody else.
I'd say
we would refer to them as stepping stone raiders.
we had 11 to 12 that were like, this is our solid core.
Yeah. So we needed to figure out what was, what we were going to do, whether we were just going to like recruit or merge or whatever. And this story is the reason why I'm against merges, which will become evident in about 30 minutes when we're near the conclusion. Let's be honest, 30 minutes will be halfway through. Anyway. So, we ultimately decided we didn't want to put in the effort to literally recruit 10 more people. So we figured, fuck it, let's just take the easy way. So we started looking around for guilds on our server that had similar to slightly above our progression. We ended up finding one called Crown. They had been a guild on the server, Hyjal, for the record, for a long time, like 6-7 years.
Yeah.
Like established guild, social guild. Like they weren't pushing ladder or they weren't pushing rankings on server. It's not like nobody knew them from that, but they were always a presence on the realm, which makes the end of the story so much worse.
But and that's something that we were
So
looking for was long-term presence.
yeah, we didn't want something that was going to flame out immediately, right? So eventually, we talked to the GM, Max. You know, nice dude. Um, Clearly knew how to run a social guild that would, stand the test of time. Um, had some odd ideas about how to run a progression guild, but it's all good. So we ended up having a talk with him. Everything went well. The first talk with just him was great, and then it was an officers and officers talk that we had, like all of Crown's officers and all of Side's officers, and just trying to figure out like how's this going to work? Can this work? What's the structure going to be like? Who's going to do what? And I was raid leading for Psy. Max was raid leading for Crown, and we had decided we're going to do 2 raid nights just to test things. One with him leading, the group of half and half, and then one with me leading the group of half and half. And after the second night, which was Trial of Valor, um, we had decided like, yeah, this is a good fit. Everything's gonna it looks like it's gonna work nice. And Max was like, you know what, like we have a similar leading style. Why don't you just lead and I'll just focus on tanking? I was like, okay, cool. So we cut the officers down. I think he demoted 2 of his, and when we all joined, I think Panda and Trek and Sci-Fry all stopped being officers. Either that or Panda was still an officer.
I think it was just us 2 officers.
Yeah. That's right, because when you left, Panda became officer to cover that spot. So yeah, basically we gathered the 2 groups together. We all joined Crown, and we started raiding. Very early on, maybe 2 weeks in, um, some of the I hate classifying this as like Psy guys versus Crown guys because it sounds clicky, and I never want a guild to be clicky.
But we hadn't had enough
Some of
time
the
to conform,
yeah
so
yeah some of the Crown or some of the Psy guys were talking about how they didn't like certain things, and one of those very vocal people was Meeps. He had issues with Max, I believe. Was your major issue?
yeah, yeah.
Yeah. I don't know if you want to go into what exactly your issue was.
Uh, Now years later, I can't really remember everything, but a big part of it was just how in the beginning, and like Psy has been run as a as a group. Like anyone in the officer position, and even people that aren't officers, like we take input from everyone, but decisions are made in a group, and
Mhm.
that's how it works, and that's what works for us really well. Max decided everything. Like he would listen
Yeah.
to some input, but then he made a decision, and there was no discussing it. Like once it was made, that was it. That was done.
Yeah.
And how he went about some of the decisions and his attitude, he was really disrespectful, which
Yeah.
usually doesn't bother me, but for coming from him for whatever reason, really got my hair on edge. Like got my back up. So yeah, it didn't take very long before I got sick of Max and how he was doing things.
I can't remember any specific examples of things that had like made people upset or whatever, but I can remember um like we would be discussing something as a group, and the way that we work in size, we'll have an issue, we'll bring it up as a group, as the officers, and we'll figure out what we're going to do. And ultimately, like current version of Psy, if it's raid related, ultimately I'll make the decision, but very heavily listening to the input from everybody else. If it's guild decision, then Rise will make the decision because he's GM. But at least we will listen to everybody. With
Yep.
Max, it was like the conversations with the officers was ultimately just a show. Like
Right.
he was like, okay, this issue came up. How do you guys want to deal with it? And then we would all give our opinion. He would say what he wanted to do. And even if everybody was against it, be like, nah, man, I don't think we should go that route. I think you should think about this way. What do you think? And he'd be like, yeah, that might work. And then an hour later, there'd be a message in Discord, exactly what he had outlined as his idea and ignoring all of our input. So it very much felt like it was a show.
Interesting.
I can't give a specific example because that was years ago.
Right.
So ultimately, Meeps and Max got into a conversation. It was a conversation at start about that exact issue. Max did what most people do when they're confronted: defense. Just put the walls up. I'm not listening to you. I'm right. You're wrong. And then the two of them started yelling. The rest of us grabbed popcorn and just listened. And eventually, Meep said, "You know what? Fuck this." He just left, disappeared. The rest of us, we were like, "Well, fuck. Now what do we do?" Like, it's Meeps. And then
Fuck him. Let's
ultimately, the
keep
decision
going.
was like, ultimately, the decision was, well, it's only one person. The rest of us are still together. So we were like, fuck, this sucks. So we all still kept in contact with Meeps, and we would
Yeah.
constantly, let him know what was going on in the guild, even as far as officers. Like, most officers shouldn't divulge officer information to other people, but I'm sure every one of us has one person that will bounce an idea off that isn't an officer just to, you know, let some shit go.
Yeah, it happens.
Meeps was that for all of us.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there'd be an issue. I'd dump it on Meeps, and he'd be like, "Yeah, I just heard this from Panda."
Yep.
Oh, really? Yeah, and Trek told me about 30 minutes before him. Like, oh, okay, well, be prepared for the next person to message you. He's like, all right, cool. 15 minutes later, yep, got the last message. And it's like, fuck. So we would
Sucks,
have
guys.
those
Really
conversations
sucks.
all the time. Yeah. It all kind of came to a head. I will say, in defense of Max, there was one thing that even to this day I have never seen done before. That very first raid night, I'll rewind back to the very first raid night after we had made the decision. So we had done the one raid with him leading, the one raid with me leading. We decided we're going to come together. Very first raid night, we go into Tia Trial of Valor. We're about to start pulling Odin, and I'm saying like, all right, guys, hey, I know this is going to be a adjusting process. Just happy to be here, happy to see all of you guys. The larger roster now, blah blah blah, and in the middle of kind of that, getting everybody to be more cohesive. Somebody spoke up. I know who it is. I'm not going to out them because they're a nice person. But somebody spoke up and said, "Who the fuck are you?" And to this day, I got to give it to Max. His response was, "Hey, shut the fuck up. That's your goddamn raid leader." And I was like, you know what? He didn't have to do that, but he did. And to that, I'm super grateful because as a raid leader on a very first night, especially coming into a guild that's pretty much already established and you're just literally taking over, it's a little bit intimidating. More full disclosure, there's still some nights now where before prog on a boss or whatever, we'll be pulling up to a boss and I'll pull up whatever guide we're working our strategy off of, and I'll be really quickly reading it, mute mic, and like half hyperventilate like right before the fucking boss, been like, okay, just a little bit of anxiety, because if I say something wrong, if I give the wrong idea, we're gonna waste 30 minutes doing something wrong, So anyway, the fact that he did that, mad props. Fast forward, we're working on Croesus. The thing that ultimately came to a head.
Trick.
We were working on Croesus, and Trek, about an hour and a half into the raid, wiping on the same boss over and over and over, got bored and would just decide he's going to double jump, glide way out into the middle of the lake and die. He did that 2 or 3 times on a good pull. Not even like anybody was dead. We'd just be halfway through the fight and he'd just double jump, glide, fly off. He said he fell asleep. We were like, I don't know, it's hard to fall asleep and hit your space bar 3 times, right click, and kind of glide into that little rock area while you're asleep. But okay, whatever. Max didn't take kindly to it. He blew up. Trek blew up back. They argued for about 15 minutes, and then Trek was gone. So now 2 have left. This is when the second warning signs were written on the wall. Airlorn then came in to tank with Dagger. The 2 of them, they worked well together. We started doing the boss in the courtyard. It went fine. And then shortly after that, maybe as we were working on Botanist or Tyke, I can't remember. One day, I don't know, should I out who messaged me? He's proud of it.
Wasn't it Stephen?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Okay. So one day,
Steven.
it was Steven. Well, we all knew. So one day, Steven, very vocal, very good, very friendly, like super fucking nice guy when he's sober. Um, love
Which
you,
is about
Steven.
half the raid nights.
Yeah. Look, we have our issues for something entirely different, but I'll admit he's a super nice guy, very good at the game. And at the time, we were like, thick as thieves, because he was one of the very few people that were still left from Psy. He messaged me. He's like, "Yo, what does Max do?" And I'm like, "Well, he's like the GM." He's like, "Yeah, but what does he actually do? Does he like contribute to the strat talks or anything?" I'm like, "Well, no." It's like, "Well, does he raid league?" "Well, no, I do that." "Okay. Well, does he like contribute anything?" I'm like, "Well, no." And he's like, "So what does he do?" I'm like, "Well, crowns his guild." It's like, "Yeah, but what does he do?" And I'm like, "All right, point taken. What's your solution?" And he's like, "Well, why don't we just all go to Psy?" And I was like, "Tell you what, let me see what the other officers think." 15 minutes later, raid ends, and we're telling Max that um, we don't want to take Crown away from him, force him to give up ownership of the guild past GM and like leave.
So we're just gonna
So
take all
instead
his
of that,
raiders and leave.
literally every member of the raid team plus Overman, who is a raid team by himself, are all going to
Right.
leave the guild, and he can keep his guild with him and all his alts in it, and we're all going to go to Psy.
Which, by the way, the time for me, like I'm, was separate at the time. I hadn't really been doing anything. I'd been doing casual raiding, and from my perspective, what had happened was I had mentioned because I'd missed raiding with the Psy guys, but they had a full raid schedule, so I'd messaged a couple guys. Do you want to start raiding like really light? Friday, couple hours, and this was like a week before Steven mentioned that to Jay, and then out of the blue, Steve was like, "Buckle up, buddy, we're coming back."
Yep. Yeah, it all happened really quickly from Steven's message to we all left the guild. Not even kidding, was maybe 3 hours. But I guess Steven had already been like boiling it over with Meeps, just letting him know like this might be happening or something. But yeah, that night we all left and rejoined Psy and just continued progging. At some point, I think that was when you actually joined us because Crown had just all moved over to Psy, and I think you and Zachary, Dis, Cern. I know that's when I met Decap
And
and a
that's
couple other
around
people because you were. What's that?
that's around the time I started. Whenever I met Rise, is because I wasn't raiding with anyone in particular at that point, so I was shopping around for someone to raid with.
Yeah. So I think he like Meeps you. I think you pulled Rise into that, and that's how like the three of us linked up.
Yep. To bring this all back to us getting on the same timeline.
Yeah. So now we're all in the same timeline. We've just all been like, all right, we're doing it. What had you been doing up to that point, Rise?
So I was going back and forth through just like learning to play the game, hanging out, and just not really, doing much raiding because I was there to play with some of my buddies, and my buddies were really casual guys. To put in perspective, again, when I joined my buddy Zach, the first raid night that we did of EN, we went into normal EN. We killed the first boss after like 6 attempts, and then we went to Ilganoth, I think it was, the big eyeball guy where you had to like go inside. And that's where we ended off the first night. Me and Zach were a country fucking mile ahead of any other DPS. I mean, like, I pulled, I think it was like, I can't remember the numbers back then. I think it was like 200k DPS. Zach pulled like 100, like 200, like 13 or something. And then the next closest was this hunter, Penny, and Penny did like 107. Like, it was not even fucking close. And I looked at it, I was like, wait, you're telling me that we have to kill like one boss a night and we only raid 2 days a week and like the people here are just absolute shit? Like, this isn't very fun. So I quit. And then when I came back in Nighthold, he was doing heroic. And actually, this is right before I met you, Meeps. Yeah. Is we were doing, and they got to the point where they were a real heroic guild. They'd refined their roster. They'd really figured their shit out. and they were like a full-on heroic roster. And I got in, and I was initially a demon hunter because coming back from my mage, it's like I didn't have the legendary. I don't remember how to fucking play. I don't want to, and it was like really shitty. So when I started there, I was like, I gotta play something else. So I started demon hunter so Zach could help pull me gear. Did that for a while. I was like, I don't like this at all. I gotta do something else. So I was looking through all the classes to try to find something that I want, and I was reading shaman. I was like, okay, well they can be ranged, they can self-heal themselves, they're pretty tanky, like they have a specific kind of armor, their armor looks pretty cool. I'll play shaman. The guy that I was like kind of taught by, the guy's name is Roland, shout out Roland if you're around, he was probably the best balance druid I have ever seen in my life. And he was like, yeah, dude, I've played Ellie before, here's all you need to know, and taught me all this shit. And it was like the 4th week that I had switched from Demon Hunter to Ellie Shaman. We killed Grand Magus Elson for our first time on Heroic, and I pursed a 93. Fucking blew it out of the water.
Wow.
And then from there, it was like, okay, well, I really want to kill Gul'dan. We pushed Gul'dan after 2 weeks, and then we started doing other stuff. And we were trying to get the roster to do Mythic, but the GM didn't want to do Mythic. He was like, no, we're just Heroic, we're just having fun. And off of that was around the time that I met Meeps. We pulled him in for helping us with Heroic Gul'dan, and we killed Gul'dan, I believe the 2nd time Meeps had ever raided with us. And was like, oh, this is fucking awesome. Meeps is amazing. Like, he came in, he was fucking destroying me, he beat Slice, he beat Zach, he beat Roland, he beat Day, like, he beat all of us. Just fucking smoked us. It was like, dude, you're not part of a guild. What the fuck are you doing with your life? It's like, come raid with us. Like, we're trying to do Mythic, come raid. And he's like, I'll think about it. I did that stuff before. I don't know if I want it.
I got burned.
Please just come. And so with Aftershock, we convinced the GM to go into Mythic, and we got our first night, we killed Scorpion, and then we got stuck at Chromatic Anomaly. And that day, the best healer of the guild and his brother, Slice and Zoldan, something like that. No, it wasn't Zoldan. That's the other raid that we had.
Zoldan's a mage for later.
Yeah. But the thing is that this other guy was also a mage, and he was like something Zol, whatever. Anyway,
maybe it's the same dude.
Yeah, so a lot of us got together. It was like me, Zach, Day, Roland, Slice, the tank, Endon, and his wife. That was a healer. I don't remember her name. And they were all like, let's go start a guild. And they're like, let's just fucking start a guild. We're so good. Like, the core is here, but the officer core of this guild is just a bunch of idiots that just don't want to push content. We're like, okay, let's do it. And so Slice's brother is like, oh, I happen to have a guild that's just a bank guild that I'll open up and we'll use it. It was back around in class, or like the equivalent of vanilla. I was like, okay, fuck it, let's hop in, let's go. So that is where I got my first real taste of Mythic raiding in Perdition. And when we joined, it was Slice was GM and his brother was the only officer, and they were like, well, what do we do? And I was like, well, I can raid lead. And they're like, what do you mean you could raid lead? Like, I was like, okay, it can't be that fucking hard. And so I literally just in one day was just like, absolute, like, I want to do Mythic too. Okay, I am now the raid lead of a fucking Mythic team. And I was just like, okay, I think I can do this. So I did a bunch of research because everything was already cleared. So I just did a bunch of research. I was looking up different classes, trying to figure out what everyone could do, trying to prep healer cold and stuff. And then after like 3 weeks, we finally had a roster with 20 people, and we started pushing a Mythic. And it actually went really well. It was in a 4-week period. We got all the way up to Botanist. We were stuck on Botanist for 2 weeks. We got stuck on Star Augur for 2 more weeks. And then the 3 weeks, and then the very last week before Tomb of Sargeras launch, we killed Grand Magus Elson. And that was all just me raid leading. The rest of the raid was just in kind of shambles. And that guild kind of ended in fire. We kept trying to get better and better players because, everyone has that guild where, just as you guys were saying before with your first iteration aside, 13, 14, really? And then we had Saren. And, some other people that, weren't incredible. And, not discredit to anyone, but just, there were some people that definitely were holding the game back, especially when we were doing Botanist, when we were doing Star Augur, when we were doing Grand Match. There were people that were holding us back. So eventually, the week before, I got contacted by Meeps. It was like a week before Tomb of Sargeras came out. He's like, hey, dude, we're doing a guild. It's like, well, I'm in a guild. I'm a raid lead. Like, what do you want? He's like, I'm talking US 50 big dicks. And I was like, okay, show me some names, show me some logs. And he linked me, I think it was 6 different people. He's like, this is Chocolate, this is Panda, this is Meeps, this is Jay, this is Trek. And I'm just like, I haven't seen these numbers before. These are fucking insane. And immediately he convinced me, and I was like, all right, Slice. I just want to let you know, like, I am no longer going to be around come Tumas Argyris, and there were already previous problems with him. I'm not going to get into that, but Slice is
He really didn't
fairly
like me.
narcissistic.
Yeah, he
He,
didn't.
he he didn't like a lot of anyone. He was fairly narcissistic, and then right as Tomb hit, he did a merger with his buddy Tonic, and they had their own guild set up, and then Tonic was the raid lead for me, so they figured it out, and it was fine. And then after that, I went and joined Sun, which is the iteration that we had for Tomb of Sargeras. And it was actually me and Zach left, and I thought we tried to convince, well, we did convince Saren after a while, and then we also tried to convince Roland and Day to come over. They didn't want to. They would have been fucking insane to have had when we were doing Tomb, but they, never wanted to come. They ended up doing their own thing. But yeah, and then I met you guys, and we had a really fucking good time doing some moderate to decent pumping through Tomb, and that fell apart, and I hopped around a little bit, but yeah, now we're all cut up as far as where we know each other from, and where we really, the group was born.
Yeah.
And was this our 4th iteration of Psy to actually get into raiding?
If we're counting, splitting and coming back, this current iteration I believe is 4.0.
But you guys had the one in Emerald Nightmare, and then you guys went to Crown.
Yeah.
And then when Crown ended, that was the 2nd iteration. And then after Tomb, because of the whole roster problem thing, which I think we should talk about today, actually. That'd probably be a good topic to finish today off with. Yep. But then you guys broke up with that, and then we did a 3rd when Antorus came out, because we all wanted to get back into the game and prep for BFA, and that one went pretty well. And then when BFA hit, Old Deer, and the game was a flop. Couldn't hold people the same way, and then we died. Yeah. And now only recently, we've been together again for
would you consider the brief was it Zoldazar or whatever that raid was? The one with the big gold boss that I was playing a blood DK and Sage was also tanking, and that one where you split and you kill the big gold boss. Would you consider that as side 0.5 because we were only 3 weeks? Because you guys were all like, hey, you should come back to WoW. And I'm like, I really haven't thought about WoW in months. And you're like, yeah, but you should come back. And I'm like, cool, I've already subbed. It's installing.
Yeah, so that was actually, no, I do remember that. And we tried to put together raids, and that was the very tail end of Battle of Dazara lore going into Eternal Palace, and then it just never worked out. I think we were raiding with Theory Crafters for a little bit on High Jules. Shout out to them. They're actually almost as progressed as us. I think they're stuck on Dressed, so they're probably a couple weeks behind us, but that is what it is. But yeah, so I wouldn't really consider that as an iteration. That was, we came together for 3 weeks to try to get heroic bosses killed, and then it just kind of didn't go anywhere because we didn't really have anyone that wanted to return an overall group.
Okay, so
3.5
and Old Deer, yeah,
that was 3.
So Antorus and Old Deer was 3, and then current would be 4.0, basically.
Yeah, correct. And I think now we have what we want ironed out, as basically as good as it can be.
I love it.
Yeah.
I think we definitely got lucky with some people that we found early on.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. We found Ponju pretty early on, and he is a rock.
You gotta even think about the people that we picked up, and even that came and went. We had Lilithona. He was a big fucking reason that we were able to heal some of those fights. We had, Dindin, who came in, wasn't amazing, but he got really good. And he carried quite literally through some of our mod progression with, Meeps and Feld and Zachary when we had big bumpers to kill that boss. Pinky was around. He, was a pretty important player for getting our Carapace and our N'Zoth heroic kills. So, yeah, even people that came and went, we got really lucky with the class of players that we found.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think I can think of a moment for pretty much everybody on our roster right now that has had a moment where I've kind of went, it's a good thing we have this person. I don't think there's a single person that I haven't had that thought of so far.
Yeah.
And then there's obviously some that stick out in my mind. Obviously, guys like obviously the two of you, like Niffin, the forever guys, the guys that if we decide we're going to take a tier off or half a tier, or we're going to take an expansion off, that, their phone's
Yeah.
with them, and they're just waiting for that call. It's literally just a question mark, and they text back yes.
News
Yes.
team assemble.
Exactly.
Feld, Niffin, Aragorn, Nick,
Yeah.
Otter, kind of in that realm, even though he's more so with me. Sci-Fry, like that group of
Yeah.
people, we've been every single iteration's been like, all right, yeah, I'll hop in.
Yeah. I'm always hesitant to like list off like names like that because I know I'll forget somebody. But absolutely
Yeah.
everybody you just mentioned have all been total rocks. But specifically more than that, there's certain people that we have recruited that have helped us more than I think I would have ever expected. Like Ponju, came in, he was just a guy that we had picked up. I think he joined on like a LFG queue or something, and he came in.
Yeah, he did.
Yeah,
Wow.
and he crushed it night one. And we're like, hey, you want to come back tomorrow? And he's like, yeah, I got nothing going on. And then fast forward to 2 weeks later where we're like, all right, cool, well, transfer over. And he's like, okay. And then like 2 days later, I'm like, cool, you're a better rester druid than me. I'm gonna main switch to something that I'm eventually gonna main switch off of, and eventually main switch off of again. But do you want to just be the main druid? He's like, yeah, sure. I'm like, okay, cool, because no longer am I healing. You're gonna do all the healing cooldowns.
It was literally just one night. It was like, hey, Ponju, you've been doing a lot. You want to just be an officer, be a healing officer? And he's like, sure, fuck it, why not? I'll do that. That doesn't seem that hard. And he's been a fucking rock. It's been amazing to have him around.
Yeah.
He's like, that sounds like something that would be useful. Fuck it, I'll do it.
Yeah.
That's something that we've
Yeah.
Psy has actually lacked before, and that's something that each iteration we learn from the guild dying, and we implement something new that helps the next iteration forward. We never had a real solid healing officer. I mean, we had a healing officer. We did cooldowns, but not to the degree that he goes.
Yeah.
Also, as just a side note, just from my GM perspective, is like I really
Did you
feel
say
that
it's a psi note?
yes, I would feel like the sign out. But
Okay.
one thing that I think is kind of important, at least from my perspective as current GM, and again, I'm fairly new to this, and I think you two may agree or have your own opinion, but it's really nice to see when someone is like performing at the top or the highest echelon of their like ability, and then can like add to the raid as an extra point. Like Ponju was like, I literally play every healer. Just bring me in. If you want me to do raid cooldowns, I'll call externals, I'll call potions, I'll call every single cooldown. I'll make an order. I'll do timestamps for it. And it was just like, holy shit, this guy is just phenomenal. He just came in and was just like, oh yeah, not only am I an amazing healer and like arguably one of the best healers we have right now, but I know so much and I can just add to the rate. Like it's very rare to have someone like that, and like just having him around in that regard is just incredible.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know where I was going with that, but anyway.
There was something that you had brought up though that you said we definitely need to hit on as a topic before we end.
Oh yeah, let's do it.
Yeah.
So
I completely forgot what it was already because we went off on that tangent. Do you know?
It was telling me talking about perdition. I think just generally speaking, I guess just talking about like experiences, things that we've learned as far as like being in like a managerial position of a guild, because we've all been officers of one guild or another. We've all raid led, and then we've all been GM of a guild at some point. So I think it's interesting to see like our different perspectives and like also different time periods, because I bet it was a lot different like when you were saying like, oh, raiding back in BC and Wrath, it was like I was the rogue leader or I was the melee officer or whatever, and we don't have that core exactly, but it's very different to see how different guilds have done it and what's successful and what's not successful. On that note too, I think it's interesting to have an officer corps like we do now, where basically every single one of us has either been an officer, been a raid lead, or been a GM. Obviously excluding Nick, but he has experience in the other positions. And Ponju is just amazing at his current position, and there's no doubt that he just fits in perfectly. Right. So I guess talk about what are the experiences that you guys have had in the past with being in that position. Because I guess I could start, because mine was the weirdest. Just literally just
go for it.
It was literally just like, hey, Rise, like we're trying to figure this out. Like, and I was like, okay, just let me raid lead. I'll raid lead. And it was so weird to be like, okay, I'm just a player. I'm just listening to calls, looking at notes, and then suddenly it's just like, oh, we're making a guild. You're an officer and you're raid lead. I'm like, okay, fuck it. And it was like really weird because in Perdition, there were 5 of us, and we had the raid lead, we had a dedicated healing officer, we had a recruitment officer, we had a melee, and then a ranged officer. And the tanks were just doing their own thing. Endon was an officer; he was our main tank at the time, and it was kind of just like anytime someone would do something, it was you would go talk to your officer. And then whenever we would do like a group discussion, it would be we would bring up our concerns, and then it was kind of like Slice would give his opinion, and we go with Slice's opinion. Kind of like I think you guys mentioned Max or whatever his name was. Is kind of similar like in that to him, where it was he would usually have the final say. Sometimes we could sway him, but ultimately it was his choice. And it was really hard to be in that environment, especially because I get the feeling that it was kind of like Meep's environment, where the officers were the toxic part.
Yeah.
All the officers were the big dicks trying to, flaunt, prove themselves and parse and like shit talk the others and make people better through that. And it worked to a degree. We didn't get cutting edge, but we got relatively close to the time we had allotted. But it was weird to be in that position. I think that's one of the big things I learned. It's like if other people that are in like a leader position have an opinion or an idea, you really have to listen to it, because there were some decisions that Slice made, for example, that were just fucking dumb. And it was like the raid was like, what? Why are we locking out on Croesus when this is our first week getting here? Like that kind of weird shit. It's like, oh, I just really want to kill Croesus this week. It's like, okay. But yeah, so like, or like, you're like, oh, I want to kick this person, and we're like, why? Like, what did they do? And we, saw the story, and it's like, okay, well, let's go talk to them. No, they're already removed. Like, what? Like, or like, oh, we're gonna trial this person. Well, this person doesn't look very good, and we don't really have the role. Well, I'm trialing them, and they're coming in on Tuesday, and they're going to take X person's spot. And it's like, okay, that's kind of weird, but whatever. But it's been weird to be in that position and then be in this position where it feels like there's like a co-leadership, where it doesn't feel necessarily like one GM making a choice or one raid lead make a choice. It's a collective of 3 or 4 of us that can all input really good information. I think that's, in my opinion, that's probably one of the biggest reasons that this guild that we're in now, Sai, has survived and succeeded as good as it has right now, because it's multiple heads doing a democracy instead of an oligarchy from one person, because that can get screwy.
Right. Yeah. But at the same time, we make it so that, like Jay was saying earlier, if there's a guild decision, you've got final say. Like, so someone makes a fucking decision, and not just, well, I don't know, guys. Let's just keep talking about it till nothing gets done.
Well, yeah, and on that same note, like if it's a raid-based decision, Jay usually makes the ultimate decision, or if it's a healer choice, Ponju gives his information, he usually decides. Yep. But it's, instead of it being, hey, here's the information, and then the last person says, I think those are valid points, but we're doing this. I think it's much better to sit there, talk about it for a long time, and then finally come up with a decision that we have all melded in some way and that we all can somewhat agree on. And that, again, that's what I feel like is the most important part for me, as far as like seeing it in the past with Perdition and other guilds. Just like sometimes the management just makes really shitty decisions, and usually it's one person just fucks it all up because they just make a decision, they make a call, and everyone else sits there like, what's going on?
Right.
Yeah.
So I guess, Jay, because you've been around the longest and I kind of prompted it a little bit. Yeah. So like, what was it like doing that kind of stuff way back in the day, and then in comparison to now? Because that's something that I'm really curious about, actually.
All right. It's a different experience, because obviously, I've arguably matured over the last, 18, 19 years. So being obviously much younger, like teenager, in high school, like I think WoW came out when I was in grade 8, maybe 9.
What?
No, not that early.
I'm not that old, you fuck.
No, hold on.
That was like grade 11. Like beta was grade 11. Release was grade 12. 2005 graduated?
2005. I graduated half a semester late. So
2006
would have been
late 2005.
I don't even. Fuck.
Oh, 11th, 12th grade is whenever WoW came out.
I was definitely playing WoW before I got expelled from my first high school. For what it's worth, I got expelled because I kept skipping class to go to the park and smoke weed. I did that because I was up all night raiding all the time.
The life and times of
So-
Canadian Jay.
Yeah. I wasn't really expelled. They just said, "Hey, since you're not showing up, just don't come back next semester."
Just
Which
don't
was fine because
transfer.
I had already moved to like one city over, so it was a hassle getting driven to school every day. And my parents were pissed that they were driving me 20 minutes to go to school, so I didn't have to be separated from my friends just for me to not go to class. To be fair, I was still with my friends. We would all skip together and get high.
Release date November 23rd, 2004.
Yeah, I just don't know how old I was at the time. How old am I now? I was born in 87, December.
You're about to be
Am
33.
I 32?
You're 32.
Okay, cool. So, however many years back that was, reverse age me. I don't know. Like, I'm terrible with knowing my own age. I know my birthday, but I don't track my own age. Let's put it that
You
way.
were
How
you
long-
were
how long
17.
is Bob now?
16,
Yeah,
17.
that's what I thought. You were 17, but that doesn't
Okay.
sound right because that means you'd be in like late high school. Like that's junior senior year.
Okay, so
The
I
weed fucked with
graduated
his
when I was
memory.
19. Let's put it that
Okay,
way.
so that would be sophomore junior year when you were 17, roughly. Sometime
Okay,
in
what
that
grade
range.
is that? Grade 10?
10.
12, no, 10 to 11, 10 to 11.
Yeah.
Okay, because I went through grade 11 twice.
So it was
Okay,
11
Yeah.
the first time.
Yeah, 11 the first time.
okay, makes sense. So then I would have been playing Diablo 2 in grade 10 because Diablo 2 is what got me into the Friends and Family beta.
Yes.
Gotcha.
Okay. Because I was such a notorious TPKer on US West that Blizzard just decided to give me Friends and Family. I don't understand it. No, I got an email, but I was top 5 on US West ladder. I don't know if they ever proved that I was a TPKer or whatever. Look, I got a shady history. Let's just leave it at that. Anyway,
More on that
so
later.
yeah, more on that later. If we ever go into it more. But yeah, so being that I was much younger, obviously, still a kid. Like even in grade 12, let's be honest, you're still a kid. You don't know shit. You think you know shit, but you don't know shit.
Fair.
So obviously raiding with a bunch of people my own age, but also people that are, our age now at the time, and I was just kind of put in that position where because I played my class pretty well, I was like, all right, cool. They kind of listen to me. That's awesome. It was a different feeling because nobody took the game that seriously, or at least they may have, but I didn't feel that. The stark difference between now and then, and this correlates to leadership as well, is when we were playing back then. I mean this in the nicest way possible. Everybody sucked.
I think that's fair to say.
Oh, yeah.
There's a reason MC took like 49 days to clear or whatever then, and there's a reason why WoW Classic MC was cleared 3 days after Cap or something like that.
Funny side note, the fastest clear for NA of AQ40 that dropped this week, 38 minutes full clear.
What?
Yeah.
An NA guild cleared it in 38 minutes.
Yeah. I saw that on the front page of Wowhead the other night after raid. I was like, "Oh, AQ is launched? Oh, that's cool."
Oh.
Literally the next post, world
AQ is
first,
cleared?
classic
Oh, that's
NA.
cool.
Yeah, that's insane.
Yeah. And I was just like, okay. But okay, so to put that kind of to correlate it is everybody now is much better than they were back then. So back then, if you had any degree of give a fuck, most guilds were like, this guy's in charge. Like
Yeah.
everybody in your class would be like, he knows what he's doing. He should lead us. Like we're talking back before Feint gave you a damage reduction incoming, right? Like nowadays, I think Feint is a defensive cooldown.
Yes.
Back then, it was just a threat dump. But nobody used it. So all the rogues would be in stealth, they'd run up and they'd like ambush, and then they just white dagger stab Anixia in the butt for about 8 minutes, and then they'd be able to hit all their buttons. Meanwhile, I was just like, okay, cool. Assassinate. Or ambush. Sinister strike, eviscerate. And I'm doing my full rotation. No, my numbers are off the chart. Everybody else is doing white damage, and they're like, how are you not pulling threat? I'm like, I'm using feint. They're like, what is feint? And I'm like, read your spell book. And they're like, what? And then they all scroll through it, and they're like, oh my god. The week after the 8 other rogues learned what feint was, we killed Velistraz like 4 minutes quicker.
Wow. Holy crap.
Like, it was just insane, the amount, like, that's how bad people were at the time. So nowadays, obviously, people are much better. People care more now, whereas back then, I think it was just like this big social game that everybody liked. Nowadays, I think people care more, so they invest more time into it and they have more pride in it.
Mhm.
While as things like, Warcraft movies having, these epic compilations of MC bosses going down and that whole, machinima movement and stuff that happened, and then everybody taking pictures in front of, Sulfuron's hammer as it's sitting in the flames, that was by and large like the thing that happened. Nowadays, nobody takes screenshots of their kills. Like, all right, we
Not
killed
many.
it. Let's go to the next
Yeah.
boss. So while there's certain things, the pride has shifted in certain ways, and I think that also tends to change the way that certain people viewed leadership. So back then, the structure that I was in End Result, Linksys was in charge of everything. Blood Craze was the tank. It was his brother. He was the main tank. He would do everything tank related. But Linksys, he would just tell us, okay, you go do this, you do this, blah, 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 blah. And then we would all manage our class. So I would have all the rogues be like, you guys are going to go here. We're going to do this, blah, blah, blah. And, it helped that I could go in stealth and be like, run around with a marker on my head, be like jumping, like, this is where you want to be when this happens, without pulling the boss. And all the hunters are like, flare, that's where we're going to go, and all that stuff. Nowadays, it's much easier with world markers.
Yep.
Yeah. So given that people didn't really care that much back then, it was a lot harder to kind of illustrate points. People didn't take pictures of the room and put little icons, be like, this is where you're going to go and everything. So everything kind of felt like a lot more trial and error.
Mhm.
And that definitely did permeate into the social aspect of the guild. Even though it was a 40-man raid, that meant you had a 60-man roster. Because think about our guild right now. We have a roster right now, including trials, of about 27 on a good night. How many post out every single night?
At least 3.
Yeah. Every single night, there's at least 3 people that post out. That's with that roster of that size. Now, if you need a minimum of 40, just double that. You have 6 people posting out. If you have 40 and 6 people post out, you don't raid.
Yeah.
You're not going to fill 6 people.
Mhm.
Like,
Well,
you guys know,
6 good enough people.
back then, everybody was good enough because everybody was shit. Like, literally, a Rogan pure Shadowcraft, you would bring.
I was about to say, to be fair, like, sure, there were 40-man raid, but there were only 15 people doing anything of consequence.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean,
Also-
well, I proved that with Kyle, not this one, obviously, but you guys know Kyle.
Mhm. Yeah.
And a buddy of mine, Jeff, who has a really tragic story. Maybe I'll share it at some point. You guys have both heard it many times. The infamous bar and consequence story.
Mhm.
Anyway, he he couldn't make it to Prague and Nixia one night. After I had finished doing Naxxramas, we had cleared Naxxramas on the PTR, and I decided, all right, cool, I'm not going to run, with you guys in VC. We're going to split up here and everything. Swifty went his way, Linksys and Bloodcraze went their own way. I went my own way with Jeff, and we made Kingsbane V1,
Mhm.
and we were doing ZQ, AQ20, and we were like, you know what? Let's just go bust some 40-man raids. And they're like, but we only have a roster of 17 people. Be like, fuck it, let's go do it. So we 14-manned at Nixia in vanilla with our main healer, Dwarf Priest, because you had to have one for Fear Ward,
Mhm.
God, yeah.
being played by somebody who does not main that character. We literally account shared our main healer so that we could get the kill that
Wow.
night. Yeah.
Wow.
So Jeff played Kyle's Dwarf Priest so that we could make that happen.
That's
Yep.
so weird. That'd actually be another topic for a different night.
We 15-man Gar too, by the way.
On like another podcast, like talking about like how different the game was in comparison to like how it is now. Because like I talk to Mike Necro all the time,
Yeah.
and he was like, "Oh yeah, we got to Twin Emperors on AQ on our first raid week," and I was like, "Well, how hard is the raid?" He's like, "Dude, it's stupid. Like it's so easy. It's brain dead. I'm just like, okay, like why is that fun? He's like, I don't know, it's just really fun. Like that was the game back then. Like the game was so much easier and less
Yeah.
complex than it is now. In
Well,
retrospect.
the game was at such a basic level that the barrier to entry was so low, and unfortunately, the gap between a shit player and a really good player was about this much.
Yeah, it
Can,
was for a mage. It
You
was one more frostborn.
do you know how to
you could
dispel?
notice it,
Do you know how to
but
feint?
Yeah, do you know how to feint?
yeah, literally for rogues, it's did you know feint exists? If yes, you're gonna do double the damage of any
I
other
mean,
rogue.
that went well into that. Like that gap went well into Wrath of the Lich King. Even like that was one thing that I said because I was leadership in a couple of different guilds, and we rated moderately, like we cleared ICC or whatever. But I just dispel. Has this guy ever dispelled during a raid night? No. He's like definitely not as good as these other healers, just because he doesn't even know his full toolkit.
Yeah. You generally, I think you can tell when you see somebody in the first raid night of whether they know their full toolkit.
Right.
Oh yeah,
Because like you'll see a mechanic about to come, like I don't know, like a meteor is gonna come down. You can see the thing on the floor, and you see a hunter walk out of it instead of hitting one global and keep shooting. That's what like you can literally know. Like, does he know disengage exists? It's one global, not having to move for 4 seconds. You just hit one button. Same thing with a mage. Like you're casting, you're casting, you're casting. Turn, blink, keep casting. As opposed to run, 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 run. Now keep casting. Like you
yeah.
just lost 3 spells. So, but sorry, going back to your original question though. Um, buckle up, we're gonna get off on tangents. The difference back then, generally the one person that cared the most was the GM, and then everybody else was like, we're gonna listen to him. So that's ultimately what that was. And we, like I said, we got like world 50 or something. We did, like I said, cleared Naxxramas on the PTR. All with people that were just like, yeah, we're gonna listen to this guy. Like we were nowhere near as good as like Nihilum or I think Rapid Eye Movement,
Love
all the
Legion.
world top guilds, mostly European bastards because they all took time off and stuff. And the rest of us had school. But yeah, I mean those guys were all really good and stuff. But from our perspective, it wasn't really taken that seriously, or if it was, it wasn't by everybody. It was like 3 or 4 people that buy in, and then everybody else was like, yeah, okay, I'll just listen.
Yeah, I'll come hang out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think in a larger raid, that can work. But when you shrink it down to what eventually became 25 man in Kata and Wrath, probably Mists, I believe I wasn't raiding then, and then ultimately became 20, what they settled on is as you diminish the amount of people, the amount of give a shit needs to come up. So Tribute to Dedicated Insanity and Herald of the Titans, the reason why they're so fucking hard is not because you need to have the item level appropriate gear for that raid tier. For example, Herald of the Titans, you have to have Old War 10 man eye level gear to kill Algalon with everybody in the raid using gear of that item level or lower. If
Mhm.
one person had an Old War 25 eye level gear on, no achievement for anybody.
Yeah.
The reason why that was so hard was not because of the eye level. It was not because of the gear. That was not the difficult part. The difficult part was getting 10 people that gave a shit enough to compensate the fact that they have that reduced gear with higher IQs or, the 5-head plays. Like baiting a smash out into Africa so the raid didn't take it and kill us.
Mm-hmm.
Literally, our hunter did that. Distracting shot, run off, smash, took one for the team while we finished up. Good man. But that was the major difference, and it wasn't really a leadership thing. It was just like a like-minded people. And then with the exception of Max and Crown, which we already talked about, I've always associated myself with people that, whether they're dicks or not, hey Meeps, everybody has that same level of care, at least towards the game, and again, whether or not they're dicks is irrelevant. They have that same level of attitude towards their common goal of killing bosses, and generally don't actively try to douche each other. They just we all want to get this boss down. How do we do that? Oh, okay, well, we should do this. We should do this. Okay, cool. And, talking about it as a group, with the exception of Crown Max era. Every guild I've been in has always been run that exact same way, all the way back to vanilla.
So even past vanilla, did you ever have an instance where it was like mine, where it was like there's a healing officer, there's a ranged DPS officer, there's a melee officer? Because I've heard, especially from other guilds like Resistance, like they didn't do that. They thought it was really weird. But for us in Perdition, it worked out pretty well at the time. But like even now, we don't need it. So like, was that like a thing, or how was that like similar to your experiences?
In vanilla and 40 man, like I said, every class had its class leader. They weren't an officer. They had the officer tag in the guild rank, but we could read and type in officer chat. But really, when it came down to decision making, it was the GM and his brother that made the decisions, and it would just trickle down, his demands, and then we would tell everybody underneath it. If anybody had a question, they would either just ask in the group in front of literally 40 people, or they'd ask the class leader, and the class leader would be expected to know the answer.
Gotcha.
Okay. So that you didn't have 40 people whispering the raid leader in one night.
Yeah.
Oh, we've all had that moment.
Yes, we have.
And by the time I came into raiding, class officers had mostly disappeared, but I'd heard of them because 40 man raiding hadn't been that long ago whenever I started raiding. But pretty much most of my experience has been with a kind of community of officers. Although sometimes, since the inception of Psi, I've been in Psi, I've been in a couple other guilds, but never as seriously as Psi since Psi started. And I see a lot of the time it's real similar. It's, you got your group of officers and they decide as a group. But in Simple Math and Pathogen, those were more of run. Pathogen especially was run by Mateo. Like everything. He raid led, he decided the strats, and it worked fine because of how that guild was. Like everyone in that guild, if you look back at who was in the guild, you'll see those same names crop up in Easy or Limit. Like these were the top performers, and I think we could have benefited from a larger network of leadership in Pathogen, but it worked just because of the talent that he had in the guild. But whenever I started, like, I didn't join a guild till mid-Wrath. And then, like, the course of my raiding experience has just been gradually up and up and up until Pathogen, and now been Psi pretty much ever since. But a lot of the guilds I've been in was, real similar. It's just your officer corps talks it out and decides what's best for the whole guild.
Okay, yeah, I feel that. Yeah, I guess in that regard, so we've all kind of had the same like background as far as like the times where we've really felt successful, other than like there's been times where someone has just been a really good leader, but primarily because of the talent. So that's interesting to see that. It's nice to see it from different perspectives too, because it sounds like it's much weirder, especially when it used to go on back in the day in comparison to now.
That kind of made me think of something. And I'll pose a question to you guys. Is there anything from pre-Psi that you've had just such a good either experience with, or something that you thought that was so fun or innovative or just cool that you're like, fuck man, if Psi did that, 10 out of 10?
So I'll go first, and this is something that I have wanted to do for a while, but it's really hard for people to commit to more things. I really like it when there are community-run events in your guild that aren't necessarily just the raid. And to give some examples, when I was in Perdition, we used to have an extra raid night where we would go and just do achievements, because Perdition had been around for so long, but it didn't have any achievements. So like we didn't even have like the Thundering Serpent mount, which is like I've seen that mount so many times, and it's such an easy set of achievements to go get. You need like 3 people, but it was like, oh shit, like we don't have these mounts, we don't have this guild tab, we don't have all this shit. Let's just go on a different raid night and let's just go knock it out. And we would like log in, on a Sunday evening for like 3 hours, and we would just burn like 50 plus achievements a night. Like we would literally like the very first night that we did it, we did every achievement run that we found realistically possible in the entire expansion of Burning Crusade. So we did
Wow.
every single Burning Crusade raid. And like there was one of them where we sat at Gruul for like 6 minutes, and it was like, we literally can't attack. We have to wait for this mechanic to happen. We have to do the mechanic right to get the achievement. It was like we did that, and we were just shooting the shit, being fairly toxic, but at the time it was fun, having a good time. And then in Resistance, they would also do the mount runs, which would be the Jaina mount run. They also did some like old challenge stuff, like they tried to do like randomly, like halfway through Eternal Palace, like I really want to get the transmog from Gahoon. And someone was like, fuck it, let's just go clear full mythic Uldir. And we just got in a group on a Sunday and we was like, fuck it, let's just go clear mythical deer. And we just cleared mythical deer and just like trying to figure out how to do Gahoon with like 16 people. And we're like, has anyone done the balls? It's like one person like, I think I remember. It's just like, oh shit, okay. So we were just like trying to figure out that. Doing like an achievement run in Mythic was fucking phenomenal. So just having a community, instead of just a raid team, having the community there to go do fun shit with, where it feels like a social interaction of like a family or like a group of friends, instead of just, oh hey, I'm back at raid. That's what I think is really important to a guild as well, because that also builds cohesion with your members. That's something that I would recommend. If you're listening to this and you're part of a different guild, go do shit with your guild, even if it's like boring or like not raid. Just go do shit. Like it's gonna make you guys all better and closer and more understanding when stuff comes along.
And to add on to that, it may just sound boring. It may not actually be boring.
Oh, yeah.
I'll illustrate that by kind of my answer, and will actually be brief with this. The thing that I had thought of was when I was talking about Herald of the Titans and Dedicated Insanity. Those are the kinds of things. Unfortunately, I don't think it's going to happen anymore with how the last couple of tiers have come out, where you get a title for doing something not just in the raid, hard mode, or whatever, but doing something that, let's be honest, most people don't want to fucking do because it's a drag. That took us 5 or 6 weeks of 10 people out of our 25-man roster. After our 25-man raid, we would go into Old War 10-man and we would do split runs. So I played a Resto Shaman. We had like 3 hunters and 2 shaman alts come in to help feed me gear to make sure that I was ready to go. And then we would try and feed like 3 people per week, and that actually worked really well. And ultimately, that got us our gear to do Herald of the Titans, so everybody had an item in that slot. We didn't try to get BIS. We would just like get something Old War 10 or lower, and we would do that. And that I feel from the game perspective is missing right now. There is no Dedicated Insanity. There is no Herald of the Titans. There is stuff like hard mode achievements, but something that really shows off, like, look how big my dick is, like the title of Herald of the Titans. Right now, it doesn't mean shit. You can go back and get it right now, and it's easy. Just because of the power scale of a level 120 character wearing level 8 gear is just so easy. You can just one tap Algalon. Doesn't matter.
You still have to.
You have to achievement, and it has the date on it.
You have to have the character level has to be 80. Like you can't go in there as 120. Okay. You still have to be level appropriate.
Sure. Okay.
On a funny
I think scaling might actually affect that, though. And then the other thing is actually something that we're already doing, which I thought was really funny, and I'd bring it up because the way that we did it in the past was really, really funny. So way, way, way back in End Result, I'm about to date myself, even though I've done it a billion times. Once a month, the guild would have a movie night. So what we would do is everybody would get on TeamSpeak, and whoever's turn it was to pick the movie would tell everybody the movie literally that month. And the last day of the month, the last Sunday of the month, everybody would go to like Blockbuster or whatever video store they had at the time
that existed at the time.
Video, take it home, get on TeamSpeak, because that's how old we are.
Yeah.
And put it all in, and then everybody would be like, all right, who's ready? Everybody's ready. And whoever was turn it was to pick the movie would be like, all right, everybody got your remotes? Hit play in 3, 2, 1, go. And everybody would hit play, and you'd have a movie night with the entire guild. Not everybody took part in it, but we had anywhere from like 15 to about 30 people plus they'd have their wives or their kids or whatever. So we would literally have like sometimes 100 people watching a movie together, while all being on TeamSpeak or whatever. Nobody like really ever talked about it, but the fact that after that you'd be like, oh man, that was a good movie, and you just hear everybody be like, that was hilarious. And we're kind of doing that now, and we were a little bit before, where we'll watch a movie in Discord with whoever's there. But that is actually something that I thought of while we were talking about that was super super fun. And to any guilds that aren't doing that, highly recommend. You're not going to get everyone of your roster to do it,
Right.
because some people are just going like, I'm not going to fucking watch a movie with you guys. But even if it's a movie that you might not like, Meeps showed one. I think it was starring Chevy Chase.
Fletch.
Yeah, Fletch. It was Fletch. I'd never seen Fletch before, and I was like, this really doesn't interest me. Like, it's a movie from the fucking like 20s. Come on, man. Why am I gonna watch this shit? And he played it, and within 15 minutes, I couldn't stop fucking laughing. And it's a movie I never would have watched, ever. Dale and Tucker versus Evil or whatever from a couple weeks ago. I've never heard of it. I'd never seen anything about it. Just knowing like the two lead actors in it, I would have watched it, but I was never exposed to it. And the fact that Meeps was like, I got a funny movie for y'all, and he played it, and we're like, this is fucking hilarious.
Oh,
And during that movie was the
I was
most
niffing.
active our Discord has ever been, by the way.
Oh yeah.
In that hour and a half, there was something like 400 messages sent in that hour and a half.
Yeah.
It was insane.
And
So, perspective, everybody out there that has that, get your guild together and watch a movie together on Discord. It's hilarious.
And to that point, and the point that Rouse is making about how, there should be guild events that you do like to promote cohesion. That was actually there were two founding tenets that I wanted from Psy. And that second one has kind of gone to the wayside because the main founding tenet was a raid group. That was the original purpose. But I also wanted a group which is Psy has become. Like, we're all friends. We want to hang out in Discord. We want to see what everyone's up to. We're friends. Like, these are the people we want to spend time with, even if we're not raiding together. And that was the second tenet of Psy, that it kind of went by the wayside for a while, and like it's not the primary one, only because it's a struggle to get the mythic raid team together. So that has to be the priority. Like, if you want any guild at all, like, we got to get the raid team together. We have to form it, and then the rest of it can be our social fun time.
Yeah. And I think really aside from just that, making sure like Meep said, that you have that balance is important. But also, when you're thinking about those specific fun events and stuff, you do have to focus on your mythic roster. It's important, I think, to keep in mind that you're not going to get everybody on your roster to come to those things. Our movie nights sometimes will have as little as 3 or as much as 8 people out of our 26, 27 man roster. I would love if all 27 of us were there, but it's not realistic. You're not going to get everybody, but everybody that has taken part or shown up or whatever, you have that shared experience with them outside of raid, and it's something to help build that cohesion. And again, this goes back to when we were in Legion, and I was in that dark place with 17 fucking members every week, and I was literally Googling like, why am I such a shit GM, and shit like that. That's literally one of the things I Googled.
Oh,
turns out top answer was shut up, Jay. But
yeah,
who knew? But that's one of the things that, had we have done something like that, maybe some of those people that had stuck around for 3-4 weeks and then went, nah, you know what, like, we've just been bouncing at 17, 18, maybe they would have stayed for a month longer, and the roster issues would have been fixed. Because, as I'm sure every guild can relate to that's been in that position, when you're at that 17, it's not like you recruit 3 people and then 2 or 3 weeks later those 3 people leave. The issue is you've got like 15 core, you recruit 2 people, and after a couple of weeks, one of that original 15 leaves, and then you recruit 3 more and one of that original 14 leaves. So it's not like your new people are cycling in, it's your old people that are like, we're just never going to get there.
The more
and if
cohesive.
if 3 of those people would have held on for 4 weeks longer, We would have been mythic a lot sooner in Antaurus, and definitely went longer.
Yeah, but that happens sometimes.
But I think movie night is a very important aspect of that. And it could be a mount night. It could be, whatever your guild's goal is or whatever your raid group's goal is, whether they want to go back and clear old content or whether they want to, get cool mounts or titles or just sit around and have an hour and a half of, a shared experience like that.
Guild
I think is
houses.
something that we could have done.
Guild
Don't play
housing.
prop hunt, please.
Yeah.
Prop hunt.
Yeah. Or the ship. That was something we did very early on in
yeah.
The ship.
That was
that
really
was fun. That was so fun.
The ship. What?
Yep. Yeah, that was when it's a Steam game where you're on a ship and one of you is a killer and you got to go around killing people while everybody else is trying to figure out who the killer is and not die. It was
like
something
that. Okay.
It's like Trouble at Terrorist Town.
Okay.
Kind of.
Yeah.
And if you get enough people, you can play Werewolf or Mafia, depending on,
Town Wake Up
was a super fun party game. If you haven't played it, 10 out of 10.
It'd be hard to do, but if we had enough people, I would be so fucking down to play Town of Salem with a bunch of people. Just fucking deceive everyone. All the lies, all the corruption. It's so fun.
Yep.
Now I sound like a psychopath, sorry.
All the lies, all the corruption. I love it.
It's so fun.
Fuck corruption, by the way. But that's for another episode.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask one other thing.
All right.
And maybe this is a good ending point, but what is one thing that if you could give yourself advice like 3 years ago or 2 years ago in regards to, leading guild or whatever, what is the one piece of advice that you would give yourself? Because maybe it'll help. Maybe it'll help somebody that listens to this.
That's a hard one. I'm going to need to think about that. If one of you guys want to go first, that's hard.
Have faith.
Let's have Meeps go.
Have faith is the number one piece of advice. Stick it out. Have faith. It's not a toilet drain. It really may seem like it sometimes, but if you stick it out, you can make it happen.
I like that idea. I'm going to try to frame my response a little bit differently. What I'll go with, and this has multidimensional for me, it's be patient. There have been a lot of times, and we can talk about this on another episode, but it's like we've had times where we're sitting at 18-man roster, and it's impossible when you recruit 3 people and then one person's out and then another person's like, oh, well, I don't want to be here, or someone leaves the guild and then you're back at 19 and then you can't raid and all that stuff. But if every single person in your guild, and maybe not just from an off-group standpoint, but if you guys can all just stick with it and just be patient, then you guys will be able to raid. You guys will find the people because they do exist, but sometimes it takes a little sweat and blood. And then also the second note is like a progression standpoint. I've seen so many people get frustrated or leave a guild because like, oh, you're not progressing fast enough. We're not doing this well enough. We're not doing this strategy. Sometimes you just got to relax and breathe and realize that something is going to take an extra week. It's going to take that extra month. It's going to be a little bit longer. But as long as you stick it out for just that extra little amount of time, you can really make something work. Just from any guild perspective, whether you're a player, whether you're an officer, GM, like just be patient with your raid, be patient with people. Just give it time. This game is something that takes a long time. Just be patient.
So mine is 2. One for as somebody who's like in a guild and not in a leadership perspective. Don't hang on too long, man. It's an electric fence. Get out while you can. I'm kidding. I just wanted to contradict you guys immediately because it would have been funny.
You cuck.
No. I'm gonna totally take the coward's way out here and backseat on that answer because it was exactly what I'm thinking. I had brought it up during that Legion turnover rate. If 3 or 4 of those guys had held on for 3 weeks, we would have had 20, and then we could have built on to that. So I'm not saying it's all their fault. Obviously, there were issues, and we can get into that in later episodes and stuff, and things that we did wrong and stuff. But that is one of the things that you guys both absolutely nailed on the head. Patience and faith are 2 of the most important things as a raider that you can do. The other answer, totally not a cop-out, not stealing anybody's answer here. As a GM, as a raid leader, as an officer, as somebody who's got some sense of authority or whatever in the guild, it's not your fault.
Ooh, that's a good one.
It is not. Now, blanket statements are bad, but for the most part, it's not your fault. If you're a terrible GM and you completely destroyed your guild by the decisions you were making, and
Max.
your entire guild decided to leave you for another
Maybe
guild,
the most common
then
denominator.
maybe it's your fault. But for the most part, most guild leadership, they have the right idea, or at least maybe not the details. They have the right thought. They have that goal in mind. They have where they want to get to. They don't know the route that they're going to take to get there. Along the way, you're going to make mistakes. So piggybacking on that, part of that, it's not your fault, is try to be as honest as possible with everyone. If you made a
Transparency.
decision, the worst thing you can do is if somebody asks you like, why did we do this way? Don't shuttle up, don't get in your shell, don't try and deflect. If it was a bad decision, own it. Like, hey, I thought this would be easier for us. I thought we'd be higher prog if we went for this boss first. I fucked up. Just being real with you. Bad decision. My bad.
Look, Rodin wasn't
Your
that bad,
raid.
okay?
Sorry, what was that?
Rodin wasn't that bad, okay? Sure, we killed
Right.
Ilganoth in 13 attempts, and Rodin took us 80. We did Rodin first, but
I mean, look, if you looked at it numerically, we should have done Ilganoth before Rodin and Vexiona and Drestagath, technically, but obviously you can't do, but
right.
if you look at the pull attempts, that's the route we should have done it, is Ilganoth, then Vex, then Rodin. We did it in the opposite order because it made the most sense. But ultimately what I'm trying to say is your raid will respect you more, and even your fellow officers will respect you more if you're just honest. If you fuck up, own it.
Own up to your mistakes.
Yeah, and be as transparent as you can. That doesn't mean you have to tell your raid everything. There are certain things that we don't tell our raid. Maybe we'll get into that. Maybe we won't. Maybe Drew will cut that statement from the VOD completely and it'll never go out. I don't
It's
know.
already cut.
But okay, good. But be making sure that there's that open dialogue, which is something that we are really stressing with Psy 3.0 and then now with 4.0, is just making sure that even if it's the wrong decision, that dialogue is there. Even if it's not so much as a back and forth, but this is what we did, this is why we did it, it was a bad decision, but making sure that people are informed, then they feel more included and they're less inclined to go elsewhere. Obviously, if you have bigger problems, that's something else, but by and large, openness, honesty, and owning your mistakes and realizing that it's not all on you is the biggest thing I can tell anybody.
I agree. That's actually a really smart one to throw out there.
Yep.
I'm known to have one every now and then.
Yep. So next one will be what, 3 weeks from now? You'll get a smart idea.
Oh yeah.
Something like that.
Yeah, it's going to be useless drivel and garbage for the next 2-3 weeks. And then
Yeah,
I'll have one good thought.
I think I'm supposed to have my good thought on this Wednesday, but we'll see how that goes.
All right.
Nice.
Well, I think that's a good stopping point for our first podcast. No,
Episode 0.
right?
Yeah.
If you're seeing this, then I've relented and shown it to the public, to my great disgust. But thanks, guys, for coming along for the ride, and hopefully we'll see many, many more episodes like this.
Yeah, sounds good.
Oh, yeah.
All right, y'all. Have a good night.
See you guys.